Warnings from China on the lab leak theory. Started out as a theory. Many people, including the Department of Energy, thinking it might be closer to a reality, and China does not like that. They're saying, hold on a minute. It didn't come from our country. How dare you? We know how little they like to be accused of anything, especially from the American administration, whether it's Trump, Biden, anyone else. It is a matter of essentially protocol, that they are going to push back anytime there's an accusation like that. And so as every one of our intelligence agencies continues to sort of come to their own conclusions, the Department of Energy is checking the box. Yeah, it came from China. And it is not just the idea that maybe it accidentally came from China, but maybe that there was some intentional malfeasance within the Chinese Communist Party. As this story continues to develop, we see a return of Dr. Li Meng Yan. She is a doctor who showed up on the Tucker Carlson show many years ago to explain that she thought that this was a lab leak all along. A lot of people, like Dr. Fauci, were pointing us to different articles written by his buddies, many of whom had conflicts of interest, people like Peter Daszak, who may have gotten contracts from the NIAID to EcoHealth Alliance, which he then funneled over to the Chinese. So if we have all of these different chains and people like Dr. Li were saying that they knew this a long time ago, as this story continues to evolve, we want to revisit and commend her on her tremendous insight. But not only that, the doctor tells us that she thinks, yeah, it did come from a lab, but it wasn't just something that accidentally came out of the lab and then accidentally spread throughout the world. No, there's another story. Instead, this was a situation where, yeah, maybe there was some accidental incident that initiated it, but once it expanded beyond that initial accident, then it was allowed to run wild.
As we told you, Li Mengyan was one of the first people to tell the truth in the United States at great personal cost. She was there. She joins us now. Doctor, thank you so much for coming on. You said 3 years ago that you believe that this virus was intentionally released by the government you once worked for, the government of China. Today, we're hearing in this leak to the Wall Street Journal that it was accidental. Do you believe this leak was accidental or intentional?
Hi, Tucker. Thank you for having me again. First, I really want to appreciate you and also Fox News have been taking so much efforts pursuing the truth of COVID origin. Without your help, there won't be such milestone achievement. And I want to tell, of course, it was not an accident. And maybe for people who don't have this kind of biosafety lab 3 or 4 experience on coronavirus, maybe it's easy for them to accept the accident and lab leak. However, I'm the scientist working in such lab using coronavirus, and I can tell you, based on the protocol and also the other surveillance system, it will be impossible for the lab leak accidentally happen in such lab and cause the Wuhan outbreak and also the pandemic.
So she worked in the lab, and according to her, in her opinion, she's seen the lab protocols, the safety regulations. She's worked there. It would have been impossible for it to come out of a lab that she worked in.
Definitely. Now we just reached to the first step. It was from China's lab, and we need to pursue the truth of origin, and we need to keep going on.
We know the Chinese government allowed its infected citizens to travel in huge groups to Western Europe in the early days of the pandemic. That was intentional. But you believe the whole thing, they came up with this virus and they unleashed it on the world to destroy the Western economies and to elevate their own position globally.
I want to emphasize one thing is, I would say based on the evidence and the source I have, that the lab, virus was intentionally brought out of this strict lab and released in the community. However, I don't think the outbreak in Wuhan was intentional. I would say it was because CCP government and the military scientists underestimate the transmissibility. That's why finally it got out of control and caused the local outbreak. However, we should know that CCP government intentionally to let it go all over the world to kill millions of people all over the world later.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like they didn't intend for it to, according to her, they didn't intend for it to sort of breach Wuhan and then escape that one city, right? They moved it from a strict lab to another lab, and then maybe they were even testing it on a local population. They were not able to properly estimate its efficacy, its virality, and then boom, they lost control of this thing, and it then spread throughout the rest of the world, which is a wild theory. I mean, it seems absolutely reckless, like they would do something like that or be so careless about it. But yesterday we learned a little bit about another doctor out of a university here in the United States who's playing around with the MERS virus in level 2 labs. And so it's bizarre how sort of careless and reckless it feels like many of these people can be with something that is obviously so catastrophic if they lose control of it, which maybe they have. Now, Rand Paul, of course, has been on top of this for a very long time. He has been demanding answers from Fauci. He's been sort of holding him to account for years now, honestly. He is now catching wind of these other additional reports showing that sounds like the lab leak theory may be true. Here's what he has to say in response.
And coronavirus research took place in that lab?
Without question, it may have been one of the greatest cover-ups in modern medical history.
Wow.
It will also get out in history as probably one of the worst decisions that any government bureaucrat ever made. When Anthony Fauci made the decision to fund dangerous gain-of-function research in Wuhan under the auspices of an authoritarian government, this decision was one of the worst decisions ever made. And there's been a cover-up ever since the very beginning. You can go back and see the emails between him and Francis Collins, who is head of NIH, them conspiring basically to cover this up. But now we have a mountain of evidence. The problem is much of it is classified. What the New York Times reported from the Department of Energy that their scientists now believe that this came from a lab is actually classified, and somebody leaked it illegally.
Crazy.
But I've been saying ever since the controversy came up with Trump and classified documents and Biden and classified documents, I've been saying we overclassify things, and it makes it hard for me to convince the public, mostly Democrats, that we need to do something about this.
Right? Don't we live in a representative democracy where we're supposed to have representatives who sort of represent us? And yeah, they make a lot of decisions on our behalves, but they've also got to communicate with us about the things they're making decisions on our behalf about, right? We don't give them full autonomy to just do whatever all the time, right? They have time in Washington, then they come back and they do business here. And so they're supposed to communicate with their constituencies about what's going on because we vote for the people to go effectuate the laws in DC. But if everything is classified, if we can't see any of this stuff, if something that literally impacted every one of our lives, that impacted every one of our businesses, that caused many of us to lose people we love, cause deaths and destruction all across the globe, they still can't, be bothered to come up with a report and tell us what the heck happened here so that we, the American people, can have guidance, have transparency, make educated decisions about the future of the country when we go into the voting booths?
So part of the problem is we need to unclassify this. The scientists and their arguments, we now know the conclusion, but I should be able to freely discuss with you the actual scientific evidence that came from the Department of Energy and those reports. Those reports should be released to the media. We should all be allowed to read them. But this is still a problem. This is a real problem, and winning the final argument is that most of the documents are classified.
Yeah, it's ridiculous that we can't see really any of this stuff. And here's more Rand.
Trying to escape the culpability because ultimately Anthony Fauci's advocacy, he had to go outside the boundaries of the normal process. There's a committee that's supposed to review these dangerous viruses and see if the experiments are too risky and shouldn't happen. This didn't occur in the Wuhan experiments. Anthony Fauci gave a waiver. He was one of the few people in government who could give a waiver and said the research doesn't have to be reviewed by the committee. We're just going to let it happen.
Unbelievable. So Fauci skirted some of the safeguards for whatever reason. And we've heard many exchanges between Rand and Fauci, and he, has a hard time with a lot of definitions. Well, what is gain? Well, it's not what gain of function means. And we have different definitions, and Rand Paul's not a scientist and all of the other things. But there are still a lot of questions about, funding, money, royalties. Rand Paul has said that many of these people involved in these deals got paid millions of dollars that is really unaccounted for. They don't have to report it. Now all these people are fleeing a sinking ship. They all know that now the Inquisition is coming their direction, so they resign. They're no longer in government anymore.
Do you trust that they're being told the truth in Ohio?
No, and here's the problem. This is what the CDC currently tells you about COVID. If you're 50.
All right, so they're talking about East Palestine and all of that other stuff. Now, we've got more because those are some of the people reacting to this new report from the Department of Energy. So we've got sort of this split between the different agencies. FBI and the DOE agree. Lab leak theory sounds pretty good. The other agencies, who knows what they're doing or who's in charge of them. Usually most entities are useless in the government anyways, but 5 of them evidently are so boneheaded they said, no, it seems natural. All right, so they got the original Fauci diagnosis or something and they haven't changed their minds. But as we speculated yesterday, every time that we've seen on this channel, this pattern where any allegations go towards the Chinese Communist Party, they don't like that very much. We saw when they came here and sat down with Anthony Blinken and he said, can you please stop your genocide over there? And they said, what? How dare you accuse us of something when you have BLM on your streets? Have you seen what's happening in your towns? And the same thing goes on and on. All right. We shoot one of their spy balloons down. They say, how dare you attack our country? How dare you? We say, well, you flew it all over our nuclear bases and our idiot government couldn't figure it out. And they say, well, we're offended and, we're probably going to invade Taiwan next. So very hyper dramatic over there. And so as we want to get to the bottom of this to find out whether it originated from Wuhan, and again, we're not even essentially necessarily blaming the CCP for it or the Chinese party for it. A lot of people have questions about this guy right here, Fauci, and how he was involved in all of this by funneling US dollars over through EcoHealth Alliance to the CCP, right? Lot bigger hula hoop, in other words, than just China and the Chinese Communist Party. We want to know whether this guy and others like him were involved in it. So it is important we get to the bottom of it. It's kind of critical. All these people, as we talked about yesterday, who want to gloss over it are missing the bigger picture because we don't want to do this again. And if our government is continuing to fund this type of insane research for whatever purposes, bioweapons or whatever, right? We maybe want to be aware of that so we can make decisions about how we're being governed. But China doesn't like the implication. So the Department of Energy says, oh, yeah, maybe it did come out of a lab. And China says, how dare you even imply anything of the sort? So this came over from the fmprc.gov.cn, which stands for China. And it is from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the People's Republic. And you can see this woman here is going to be answering questions. Her name is Mao Ning, hosting a regular press conference on February 27th after the news broke from the DOE. Now, there were several questions about different sessions and considerations. You can see this is very much like what we often do here is when Karine Jean-Pierre gets asked a bunch of questions, we come through and talk about the questions. But most of these are not that interesting. We've got the Republic of Korea conversation. We're talking about President Zelensky, Belarus. But what we're looking for is this. Oh, a question from the AFP to Mao Ning. All right, Miss Ning. Question for you. The U.S. Energy Department said on Sunday that they have new evidence indicating that COVID most likely arose from a laboratory leak from China. What's your response, Mao? Mao says, right, this is official Chinese minister speaking here, says the origins tracing of SARS-CoV-2 is about science and should not be politicized. Oh, great. It's like they've got, is she like a Fauci over there? Do they have their own Fauci person over there? Says China has always supported and participated in global science-based origins tracing. And I think there's a lot of people who might contest that. In fact, China has, by many accounts, been completely opaque, not transparent at all. She said in quote here, a laboratory origin of the pandemic was considered to be extremely unlikely, in quotes. Put that in quotes. Says is a science-based authoritative conclusion reached by the experts of the WHO China joint mission after field trips to the lab in Wuhan and an in-depth communication with researchers. Wow. Sounds very sciencey, doesn't it? They took a field trip to the lab and they concluded nothing. They say it was accurately recorded in the mission's report and has received extensive recognition from the international community. Yeah, you know who else was sort of on that train? Anthony Fauci, Francis Collins, Jen Psaki, and all those people in that line, including the DOJ and the FBI, who is sending emails to all the big tech platforms to censor people who disagreed with the standard narrative. So they were just regurgitating Chinese garbage propaganda. So here's the big warning from China. China says certain parties should stop rehashing the lab leak narrative, stop smearing China, and stop politicizing origins tracing. Period. Oh man, they're mad over there. Calling it a smear against China. Well, it did come from China. I mean, I hate to break it to them. So, it could have been, I guess, apolitical if you guys would have been open and honest about it. But now everybody has made all of this political. And so, yeah, now it is political. Sorry, can't work together when you try to hide your misdeeds or your nefariousness. And there is a joint, what feels like collusion effort between everybody to keep a lot of this stuff buried and under wraps. So that's what China said out of the foreign ministry to the rest of the world. But they're not done there. All right, there's other people who are also on Twitter. And unfortunately for China, they don't have direct access to our FBI. And so they can't just send over an email to get stuff censored. Or maybe they can. I don't know. Maybe they do have direct access, or maybe they just run it. I don't know. Or another social platform. Now Elon runs Twitter now, so they're SOL. So they can't make the FBI shut Elon up. And so they're issuing another warning. Elon has been retweeting some of these wild conspiracy theories, so-called, and the Chinese are unhappy about it. Now, he makes and sells a lot of Teslas over there. And so in China, they're saying, watch it, Elon, buddy boy, you better stop those retweets or else there will be repercussions coming your way.
Oh, well, the reminder today was directed towards Elon Musk. The Tesla founder had been retweeting posts promoting the theory
Illegal
that
retweets.
Coronavirus originated from a Wuhan lab. Well, the issue is very sensitive here in China.
Yeah.
And so the Communist Party paper, The Global Times, warned on its social media site that he could be breaking the pot of China. This is a Chinese saying that's similar to biting the hand that feeds you. Now, this warning comes as Chinese officials, both on a high level as well as on a lower level of the government, are really pulling out all the stops to try to attract U.S. investment into China. The directive has come all the way from the top, from President Xi Jinping, who's been saying that there should be greater effort to attract more and welcome more foreign capital as well as foreign investment. On a local level, officials have been eagerly trying to reach out to international companies, touting how they're relaunching several events around the region and dispatching delegations, prioritizing trade shows in the U.S. and Europe. Cities, also including Shanghai, have announced that they're going to be having foreign talent recruitment drives. They do, though, have a lot of work to do. The international business sentiment has been quite shaky in the past year because of the zero COVID protocols.
Yeah, because they were locking people in their homes, residences, apartments. People were starving to death, jumping out of buildings. It was insane. And Fauci wanted that here. He said, well, they have a lot of power there. It's very convenient for them.
The slowing Chinese economy, as well as the political climate. American executives, in particular, Joe, are really nervous ahead of that select committee hearing. This is a new committee that's focused on China.
That's right.
And nobody here wants to be called in.
They don't want to be called in. I can't believe she said that. That's hysterical. All right, so they issue a warning, right? They're unhappy with that. Elon, buddy, we've got a lot of workers here who are pushing your Teslas out to the rest of the world. You better take it easy. Otherwise, things might get a little bit uncomfortable for you. We've seen what they've done to other Chinese billionaires. Not that Elon's a Chinese billionaire, but, they don't play around over there. They don't care how many billions you have. If you go against the party, you're in big trouble. Just ask Jack Ma about that one. So we have another threat coming out. Now, this one seems to be pushed by the CCP on social media. And this was an interesting little story. Eunice Yoon, CNBC Beijing bureau chief, posted this story on Twitter. Says the Chinese Communist Party, a paper, warns Elon Musk against pushing the lab leak theory. The Global Times News posted on social media, Elon, are you breaking the pot of China? Biting the hand that feeds you is the warning. And this was actually a very interesting article that I had pulled up here. So if you go over to the website, you can see it is here. It's written in Mandarin, and they've got actual links to Elon and his tweets that they are unhappy with. And so let's just use the translation tool and see what they say. They wrote for us, Musk, are you smashing the China pot? They say, in the past 2 days, another absurd incident has occurred in the U.S. political arena. Seeing that it was impossible to smear China with the so-called spy balloon incident. Okay, this is China speaking, by the way. This is what they're talking about over there. Those political forces in the United States that were hostile to China rehyped the rumor that the new coronavirus was leaked by the Wuhan virus in China. Rumor. It's just that this time their approach has exceeded the scope of normal human understanding. Because in order to plant Chinese scientists, they actually magic enough to let the U.S. Department of Energy, a government agency responsible for energy issues, carry out the traceability of the new crown virus to, quote, convict it, is what the translation says. Although even American scientists and virologists despise their politicians' political interference and even distortion of science, which is true. I'm sure that's true. I think all of us kind of despise politicians. The matter is currently fermenting in the U.S. public opinion field under the hype of the Wall Street Journal. I think they're talking about us here. They're saying that the Wall Street Journal and this is China speaking, and a number of right-wing anti-intellectual and anti-China media in the United States. Wow. And the instigation of the right-wing conservatives of the Republican Party. Oh, China's mad at the Republicans who control the House of Representatives in Congress, and they're eager to gain support and attention by attacking China. Now, they say, even Elon Musk, the boss of Tesla, a well-known American electric car brand, has now mixed himself in. And they're unhappy with the Republicans. Yeah. So as shown in the figure below, they say just after the DOE came out, Elon was promoting that the crown virus was developed by Fauci, a well-known infectious disease expert in the United States. They're educating them about Fauci. They say it was funded in Wuhan. So here's what they're saying, right? They actually underlined it. Look, Kanakoa, shout out to Kanakoa, posted this and Elon responded to it. Said he did it via a pass-through organization called EcoHealth. Right? Fauci funded Wuhan through EcoHealth Alliance. We follow the bouncing ball, just follow the money. And you find it lands in Wuhan and it went right through Fauci's house. So they're unhappy about it. And they're writing more about EcoHealth. And they've got a couple clips from Peter Daszak here. They say, why did Musk participate in this matter and follow these anti-intellectual right-wing conspiracy theorists in the United States to make remarks that smear Wuhan? They're very unhappy with Elon too. So there's the rest of the article over there. This is from a Chinese website. Don't subscribe to their Substack. All right, they don't need it. So that is what they're saying. Warnings to Elon, warnings to America. Don't you blame us for the Wuhan lab? Well, all right. Well, we kind of do. We're going to continue to do it. And you can just deal with it as far as I can tell until we get to the bottom of it. Until you can exonerate yourselves, you have been lacking in transparency, and we want answers. Whether it leads to Fauci or to Xi or anybody else, Klaus Schwab, we want answers. So we'll continue to cover that, of course. The lab leak warning from China. We'll see if Elon responds and how that unfolds. Thank you for joining us and following along and hitting that like button wherever it is you're watching it. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.